So we'll just wait. We will wait a moment or two. I don't know if we'll hold the curtain for 5, but maybe for 2.
It reminds me once, Brad, when I was a presenter, I had a children's show and there was a line at the box office and I decided to hold the show for 5 minutes. What a disaster. The collective attention span of the audience sort of expired at about 5 after the hour. And it was just
had your moment and lost it.
Pandemonium. Yeah, I learned the hard way. Never hold a show for kids.
Well, I don't know our theater for young audiences is this morning, but yeah.
You can also start too early. I got thrown out of the theater by my own production manager.
Yes.
On opening night of the festival I used to run, we had the Count Basie Orchestra, and one of the, I was 28. And one of the band members asked me, "Can we start?" And I said, "Sure." And the whole band took the stage. Meanwhile, the house was still open. The lights were up. So,
all right. Well, we're gathering as we go, but we want to get started and respect people's time. I want to introduce myself quickly and then introduce Alan as well. So I'm Brad Erickson, Executive Director of Theater Bay Area. I use he, him pronouns. I am really just so excited to be presenting this information this morning. We have been interviewing and surveying audiences for 18 months now, looking for this day, really, when the theaters and performing arts groups around the Bay Area would begin to reopen, and helping those groups understand what it is that audiences were expecting, what their sort of anxieties might be, what might help them in terms of feeling more assured, and what they're looking for in coming back to live performance. And we started this work. I was so thrilled when Alan approached me about being part of it and having the Bay Area and you all part of this great work, and was eager to do that. And we expected that we would be done with this, I don't know, Alan, 14 months ago. Yeah. But in fact, we thought it'd be 3 or 4 month study and we'd be done. But no, it went on a bit longer than that. And we have been watching these attitudes change over time, and I'm thrilled today to be able to present Alan Brown, one of the principals of WolfBrown. We've worked with Alan and WolfBrown several times before on some really important research projects, and maybe none of them has been more important to the field, at least in sort of real time, than this one. So I'm thrilled to have Alan here. I'm so grateful for all of you for joining. I'm grateful to our companies who have been part of this cohort doing the hard work of this surveying over all of this time. And I think with that, I will hand it to you, Alan. Oh, just to make sure, we were a little unclear about whether this was an hour or an hour and a half. So we're going to sort of split the difference. Alan will make sure that all of his presentation will fit into about the first 45 minutes or so. Then we'll have a discussion that will go to the top of the hour. And if folks are still wanting to discuss and talk more, we're happy to go on after that. But also just know that if you need to leave at the top of the hour, you will have received the gist of the information. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alan.
Thanks, Brad, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alan, and coming to you live from the Motor City of Detroit, Michigan. I lived in San Francisco for 10 years and miss it terribly, but I'm also happy to be in a new setting, in a new city, and of course, locked down, or rather confined for the last 2 years on this incredible journey we've all been on. So I appreciate the invitation so much. It's great to see so many familiar names on the participant list, including representatives of some of the organizations who've been in this study for the last year and a half. And some friends, consultant friends and funder friends, and just a great mix. I also want to acknowledge my colleague, Alan Klein, is on the call, and who has been really deeply responsible for making the study happen for so long. So Alan, welcome. I have new kind of data to share with you today. As Brad mentioned, we're just wrapping up the study. We actually just finished the last wave of data collection last week. So we've got sort of fresh data and also now the benefit of really 18 months of experience asking audiences about their feelings about going out again. So I'm really hoping not just to provide you with current results, but also to step back and reflect on where we are and where we're not, with not just COVID, but really looking past COVID, which has really only been possible for me, at least in the last few weeks. We've been so focused on COVID. So we're really at a pivotal moment. Those of you who are not familiar with our study, it began last year in 2020 in April and May. It was very clear to me that we as a sector needed some mechanism for hearing from audiences. Back then, it wasn't clear how venues would reopen, if that would be governmental policy or if arts groups would be able to decide. And audiences in any case will vote with their feet, and it's really ultimately up to them when they come back. So we conceived the Audience Outlook Monitor COVID-19 study as a longitudinal tracking study, which is not something we had done before. But we knew we needed monthly data, and we knew we needed to get it in the hands of arts managers immediately. So we set up a study to do just that. I had a couple of failed interactions with national foundations and eventually wound up approaching regional service organizations like Theater Bay Area, and almost all of them said, yes, we want to do this. So the first phase, we had 24 partners. In the second phase, we had about 14 partners. You can see them here. And the service organizations. Each of these partners represents anywhere from sort of 15 to 25 individual organizations who are all deploying our survey to their ticket buyers. So that's kind of how it happened. We were through a partnership with AMS Planning and Research, which is another consulting firm. We were able to reach great cohort of performing arts centers nationally, as well as university presenters and a couple other cohorts. So this is what we have in terms of data. In total, 650 cultural organizations worldwide participated in our study, and over 600,000 individual surveys have been completed. I'm just going to dive into some of the data. One of our key indicators, leading indicators really, is just asking people their perception of infection rates. Are they improving or getting worse in your area? And these are the results for the Bay Area. We have 8 waves of data collection displaying in this chart. And the green bars are people who feel that conditions are improving, and the gray bars are people who feel that conditions are worsening. And you can see the seesawing here. Last year, this indicator started in August. Things were getting worse. Remember, we were going into an election. Things were looking really grim around the election. Then the vaccine started rolling out in December. There was a lag in timing between the November and the March data collections, because we essentially restarted the whole study for a second phase. So the Bay Area cohort started collecting data again in March, and then every 2 months since then. So we have 5 data points for 2021. Things were looking great in the spring in the Bay Area. And then, of course, the Delta variant hit, but at very different times in different regions, and conditions were just different. So in July, things were really mixed. September, really not much different. And now just in November, we're seeing a gradual improvement in perceptions of epidemiological conditions. The reason I'm showing this to you is that this has everything to do with people's perceptions of the safety of going out. And it's a little bit crazy because presumably all these people have access to the same news and information about conditions in their area, and they're very split about whether conditions are improving or not improving. And that has everything to do with their behaviors. So I just wanted to share this with you. People in the Bay Area are quite mixed right now about whether conditions are improving or not, or staying the same. This is one of our indicators, gives you the long view. This is actually data from our national orchestra cohort, which is 15 orchestras in different cities. And we asked people, is someone in your household vulnerable to a serious health outcome if they catch COVID? And that indicator sat in the 50s, like half of everyone across all of our samples last year. We're reporting that household vulnerability when the vaccine started rolling out. Finally, that started to change. It went down gradually and it got as low as 32% in June of this year. Then the Delta variant hit. That percentage went up to the low 40s and has been sitting there. This is critical. This is as influential as any variable in all of our data in predicting just how cautious people are. So these people may themselves have health complications that put them at risk. They may be caregiving to someone who is vulnerable. They may have children who are unvaccinated. There's a lot of potential explanations for this, but the fact remains that right now, 4 out of 10 people believe they are vulnerable to a serious health outcome. My apologies for the canine events in the background. That will end soon, I hope. So this is that same, no, sorry. We've also been tracking people who say that they've lost household income because of the pandemic. And I really wanted to dive into this a little more. This is now Bay Area data stratified by age. And so what you saw, this is May, July, September, November, is that younger folks are just more likely to say they've had their household income affected by COVID. It's a remarkably strong pattern. That pattern diminished in September, but still folks 65 and over who are presumably retired and more on fixed incomes are less likely to say their income was affected. But still we're seeing around 25% of all patrons under 65 saying their income was affected. And I share this with you because one of the things I hope we talk about, and I hope you're talking about in your organizations, is sort of price incentives for people to come back and pricing in general. And I think we need to bear in mind that there are people in our audience, these are ticket buyers. We're not even yet talking about people who are not coming, have had some hardship financially. All right, moving on. What are people actually doing? Of course, we've been tracking that since the beginning. In the past 2 weeks, did you do any of the following activities? Interestingly, 3/4 of everyone are eating at restaurants. And it's perplexed us for many months why so many people are comfortable eating at restaurants, but not going to theaters. After all, isn't it kind of a similar experience? And we asked a number of follow-up questions on that, and we found out actually it's not a similar experience. People perceive it to be quite different. They have a lot more choices to make in restaurants in terms of where they sit, when they can leave, how close they are to other people. And we really learned through that analysis how important it is for people to feel like they have some control over their experience. We don't usually offer people a lot of choices in terms of the physical experience of being in a theater. In museums, people have a lot of autonomy over their experience, and I'm sure that's why people are just categorically more comfortable in museums and outdoor spaces. But also in this chart, the blue columns, you just want to see, we're up to 44% in the Bay Area of this sort of collective group of of audience members saying they have been out in the past 2 weeks to a live performance. There's still way more people going out to restaurants than live events, but we don't really know what normal would look like because we don't have benchmarks on this, but presumably, and the thing you should know is that this sample is I think exclusively performing arts ticket buyers. So we're not really serving museum visitors or museum members here, and that's why the figure for visiting museums is lower here than performing arts. So progress with vaccination, the happy story here, you all know, is that almost all of our audience members got vaccinated very early. Really, the story of vaccination was over by April and May. People ran out and did their thing. And it's as high in the Bay Area as it is in any other city where we're surveying. 98%. And these are, thing to remind you is that every month we take a different random sample of the ticket buyers. So it's very robust. Every column on this chart is a different random sample, and the results are remarkably consistent. And lo and behold, 98%, 98% of our audiences are vaccinated. And theaters are going to be the safest place on earth. If you think about the health safety protocols on top of the level of protection, on top of the mindfulness and level of cooperation. So it's kind of hard for us to know that and then look at the level of caution that is still present in the results, which looks a little bit like this. We ask, now that you're vaccinated, how do you feel about going out again? These are results for the Bay Area. And on the right column, you see 62% as of November 9th said, I am ready now, which is great. Remember that earlier figure, we saw 42% said I'm vulnerable to a serious health condition. It kind of makes sense that 60% of the market 60% of people are kind of back in the market. But 31% are saying, actually, I'm waiting to go out until infection rates drop further. Now, it turns out actually that some of those people actually are willing to go out under certain conditions, and we'll look at that in just a minute. But what are people concerned about? We've been probing this. I mean, it's been so amazing over the last year and a half, just how influenced people are by the media, by what they read, stories in the New York Times about breakthrough infections, about vaccinated people getting long COVID. People are smart, intelligent people, many of whom work in higher education and work in the medical professions. Are influenced by the media. We've seen that over and over again. So people, the number one concern is just people say, I just don't think it's safe yet for people to gather in large numbers. Well, that's really interesting. 3 nights ago, the Rolling Stones played Detroit and sold out Ford Field. So there are plenty of people, and the average age, I would say, was maybe 60 or 70. There are people who are quite comfortable going out in large crowds and have been for many months. But our arts ticket buyers here are really at 1.1 right now. I mean, that's an improvement since September, where it was 1.3 on a scale of 0 to 2 being concerned. But by and large, our people are still moderately concerned that it's not safe to go out again. People are also wondering how long their immunity will last. I mean, we're starting to learn more about that. We've obviously, booster shots have been authorized, so we're starting to understand that, but there are still many questions, and people are moderately concerned about that, and people are still moderately concerned about being vulnerable to a breakthrough infection, as well as the risk of transmitting the virus to someone else, even if you're vaccinated. So all of these are concerns. Some people are not, some people are. And we're really seeing kind of segmentation of the whole audience based on their level of concern about all of these things. So we asked people, what's your level of confidence what's your confidence level in your protection from being vaccinated and possibly having immunity from other reasons, for other reasons. And back in July on the left here, we had pretty high level of confidence. That was just before the Delta variant hit. And then you see a big change in September. Most people are moderately confident. The shift was kind of in that middle to upper area, just fewer people being very confident. But again, very few people are not at all confident. So we have to remember this is a shift kind of in the middle, and then things improved in November. 24% are choosing very confident. Big 46% now are confident, I would say. So subtle but important shifts in confidence. I just think that's the legacy of the Delta variant, is it shook our confidence in the level of protection we had from vaccination. I don't know about you, but after I was vaccinated back in March, I was thought, oh my God, yay, I'm finally liberated. And I just think it's been a very difficult adjustment to understand their limitations to our protection level, and we still have to take precautions. All right, resumption of demand. We've been tracking since last year just the level of comfort or comfortability that people have going to different kinds of cultural venues. This chart shows level of comfort going to a large theater or concert hall. You can see last year it was in the tank, really very, very low. Comfort level started to rise. Actually, this year in the Bay Area got up to 1 on our scale of 0 to 2, went down again significantly in September, and now it's back up again. I just want to compare that to the figures for walking around museums or galleries. Those have always been higher than live theaters, but the same basic pattern in terms of time, a peak up in July, then retrenchment during Delta variant. Now we're back up to sort of 1.5. So that's high. You can almost see it on this graph. There's a line above that, and that's people at outdoor spaces, which have always been sort of the greatest comfort. So we still have a long way to go. We're done surveying, but we're still only kind of in the middle of the scale in terms of comfort level. But the big question is sort of under what circumstances would you go out? And we had to revise our questions many times during the course of this study. I think there were 5 or 6 major revisions to the protocol. Of course, we kept as much as we can to allow comparability over time, but we also realized we had to change. This was one of the changes, when the whole sector adopted masks and proof of vaccine as a sort of standard for admittance, we had to change our questioning. And this really shows, so we only have 2 data points here for September and November. Back in September, note that 15%, that gray bar at the bottom, it's alone 15% said I would not go out at all, which was kind of shocking to us because we were looking at other figures that said that like 40% at the time were waiting for conditions to improve. But when we asked the question this way, actually 85% back in September said I'm ready to go out, but 35% of everyone said, I'm only going to go out if you offer me the whole trifecta of health safety measures, mask, proof of vaccine, and distancing. And of course, many of us cannot offer distancing. It's economically infeasible or just logistically problematic. So that 35% back in September, you can argue if they were really in the marketplace at all, because their conditions for going back were so strict. Some of you are doing really thoughtful, creative thinking about distancing, offering people last minute options to reseat themselves, maybe holding areas of the house or rows for people who arrive and don't feel comfortable and need to move. I mean, all of those tactical steps, I think, are going to matter a lot for another at least 6 months, if not actually offering individual performances in an enhanced health safety format that is specifically for people who are especially vulnerable. Things improved in November. We're up down to 20% of people saying they require distancing. More people are moved to that dual protocol space where just masks and proof of vaccine are what they want. And you see very few people at the bottom here in the yellow and green bars are people who say, basically, I'd go out no matter what, or just masks. And you can begin to see in this that when the time comes for masks to be optional, the proof of vaccine requirement will probably be the more valued protocol for people for a variety of reasons. Maybe we'll get into that in a little later. I just want to show you the difference between San Francisco and Milwaukee. It's a totally different market. The Bay Area all along has been just sort of way more cautious. People are just more cautious on all of our indicators, not too far apart from Boston. People in New York were a little more ready to go out, a little more willing. They just had a different cycle with COVID. It hit them earlier. They've had a different experience with the Delta variant, but in Milwaukee, it's, also, I hate to say it, and we don't ask this in the survey, but the political composition of Milwaukee is different. And it's very, very clear that there are more people there who are just ready to go out with no precautions, no health safety protocols. And just look how different that is for San Francisco. So I include that just to give you a sense of how different things are regionally right now around the country. Here's our calendar question. We ask people, when do you think you'll start going out? This is so hypothetical. But nevertheless, we wanted to ask it because it just sort of forces people to pick a month. We've been asking this for many, many months now. And actually, when people started coming back, their actual behavior really mapped to what they said they would do. So as of November, 60% said, actually, I've already started. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone has started attending your programs, but 60% are going to anything. Back in September, we had 44% saying they weren't going out until January or thereafter. We changed the answer items for November because we wanted to reach farther into next year. And lo and behold, that blue bracket shows that 22% sorry, I'm not sure I've got my figures correct. 16, 19, 22, 27% won't attend until January or later. And of that, 16% won't go until February. So we're starting to see now, we have improving conditions, and we're still looking at 16% of folks saying they won't come back until April or later. Now, maybe 16% isn't a cause for grave concern. If you're a Broadway presenter, it's a big concern because 16% is the difference between making it and not making it. So, what this says, those of you who are able to scale your inventory, reduce the number of programs, is demand will be diminished for quite some time yet. Attitudes about vaccine only admittance policies. I think you're all familiar with this. We've been asking people about prerequisites and deal breakers. So prerequisites are conditions that you require before you will go out. And this chart shows prerequisites for September and November for the Bay Area cohort. The tan bars here are the people saying the proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test is a prerequisite to going out, and that number is sitting at 78%. And it has eclipsed the figures for mask requirements, which are sitting at 59% right now. And really those are the two main, the red bars just so the figures for people who are, who will require masks for outdoor events. So 3/4 of everyone in the Bay Area sample says, I require proof of vaccine before going out, and 59% say masks. On the flip side, deal breakers are saying, I won't go out if you do have a vaccine requirement. And those numbers are just tiny for Bay Area, the smallest of all of our cities. So in cities like Omaha and Milwaukee and others, the percentage of people saying that's a deal breaker are just much higher. I think it's as high as 15% in some places. So, it's a lose-lose situation. There were people who don't want those requirements, people who do want them. In the Bay Area, it's so weighted towards support for those policies. And you just have to remember that there's maybe 5% or, below 10% of people who aren't going out because you have those policies. Obviously, that includes all the people who are not vaccinated, but also the people who are just opposed to that policy and don't go out because of that. But my reading of this data is that's a very small group of people. Overall, this is support for vaccine-only admittance policies. It's very, very clear. It's stronger in the Bay Area than anywhere else. And people are coming back. They're understanding the policy. They're cooperating very generously. I did want to just touch on digital participation. We've really been quite focused on researching audience attitudes about digital programming last year, not so much this year. Honestly, things just sat in the same place for so much of last year. We decided to delve deeply into questions around digital participation and preferences for different kinds of digital participation. Those of you who participate in the study have dashboard access to all of that information. But we kind of pushed it aside to move forward. I'm just going to share one data point with you. It's just remarkably steady how many people are watching and paying for online programs. It's sitting at 28%. And another 20% are watching free programs, and another 50% are not. Now, this is supposedly actual behavior. So, we've learned through all of that there's people who just don't want to watch online programs, and, fantastic. We've just underscored the value system around the live performance, which is fantastic. But many, many people are enjoying online programs and are paying for them and are learning how to connect their television to the internet and learning to create a little theater in their living room. We investigated last year, the actual technical setup at home. Are people watching on a computer screen? Are they watching on a large television? Are they connected to an audio system? And it's fascinating. It's, most people are on a computer, which is really a suboptimal from at least an audio standpoint. But millions of people are, have discovered this programming. We have done a deep dive webinar on consumer demand for digital programming. We have a lot of strategy work to do. I don't think anyone's making money at it. Maybe some. I mean, it's so interesting, the live stream experience. Some people love that. I did a focus group with digital subscribers of the Philadelphia Orchestra earlier in the year, and they were so articulate about the value of the digital experience. They all love going to live concerts, but they can invite friends over. They can press the pause button and go make popcorn. They can rewind and play a solo over again, and you can't do that in the concert hall. And I just thought, wow, it's really coming into view what that value proposition is. And some people really love it. But these are the sort of the 5 strategies that I'm seeing to various degrees in the sector. And of course, it varies so much by art form. There's so many issues here, but I'm left with one idea here, which is that the time to collaborate on digital programming is now. We can't just all try to do this individually. And there's so much great work we could do collectively around audience development, introducing people to new genres of music, work by different new playwrights, featuring, spotlighting work of Latino artists or African-American artists. There's just so much work we can do in the area of audience development, but we need to do it together. All right, moving on, just to finish up, we've just recently started asking people who returned about their experience. We wanted to do something. We realized that many of you are doing your own surveys of your own audiences about their experience, which is fantastic. We actually have a study called the Re-Entry Study, which you can read more about on the Audience Outlook Monitor website. But it's essential now to understand how people are faring when they do come back. And this graph just shows results for a question: how comfortable did you feel in terms of your health safety? And I've stratified this by people's perception of whether infection rates are going down or increasing or holding steady. Remember that from before? And this just shows that the people who are going back, the people who believe that infection rates are going down, are reporting higher comfort levels at events. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And just how perceptual this all is. The people who believe the conditions in their community are worsening are just less comfortable on average. Now, most people are somewhat or very comfortable. And that's the big takeaway here. People are coming back and having great experiences. The yellow bars and the orange and red is very small here. Those are people who are really equivocating about their comfort level. We do have follow-up questions. We ask them, how might your experience have been improved? Most of those responses relate to just desire for stronger health safety protocols or enforcement. Or, in the case of some organizations, people are upset that at the door, when you show your vaccine card, you're not actually required to also show a picture ID. So that kind of stuff. But by and large, people, and this is the last chart I have for you, is just stratified now by that household vulnerability variable from earlier. If you believe someone in your household is vulnerable, you're just less likely to be comfortable going out to performances. So perceptions are driving experiences. Most people are having a great experience, and that's good. And we need to reflect that back. I mean, we have to show people pictures of patrons having, and when people learn their friends are going out, their friends are living to tell about it and having a great time. Hopefully there will be a sea change between booster shots, children getting vaccinated, new treatments on the horizon. I've always hoped there would be a sea change of positive feelings, people's sense of risk going down. We haven't seen that yet. All of the change so far has just been incremental, and we're still a ways off from recovering. So I'll just wrap up with some takeaway observations. And here's where I really do want to kind of pivot to looking down the road here at the future. But yay, we're reopening. We had to do it. We have to do it. It's happening. People are coming back. It's slower than we all hoped. Alan Klein and I are on webinar after webinar with cohorts, and people are not in a good place sales-wise. Most people are down 20 to 50%, depending on the situation. So it's tough, that demand. Hopefully there will be a little surge of demand over the holidays, and particularly if younger family members are vaccinated and able to go out. And then in January, maybe things will be stronger. Hopefully this Delta variant surge in the northern states that we're seeing right now, especially my state of Michigan, but also Wisconsin, Minnesota, and some of the western states are not in a good place right now. And hopefully that will diminish. Hopefully there won't be another variant that will be of great concern. But if I were an arts organization, I would be thinking about what do we do if there is another variant of great concern, heaven forbid a vaccine resistant variant. I hate to even say that because we're also traumatized, but contingency planning is something we learned about, and I think we still need to be doing it. So there's segments of people holding out. Based on the data, if things, if nothing terrible happens, I think we can kind of wait this out, and in another 4 to 6 months, get back to kind of 90% of the audience. I do think people's preferences have changed. Have they gotten out of the habit of attending? Yes, I suppose. It is also true that people are responding to cultural programs that they want to see. People are going out to see things they really want to see. We have to talk about when to drop mask mandates. I've really encouraged Theater Bay Area and the other service organizations to really try to coordinate and convene people so that we can act together as a sector when it's time to change the mask requirement and make that optional. I just feel masks are such a wet blanket on impact. The way we as humans get emotional impact from live events is by watching other people and seeing their faces. And when that is obscured, it is just not the same experience. And our people are so cooperative and so happy to do that. But nevertheless, it is just not the same experience. And I do think that will wear on people. It is wearing, notwithstanding the comfort question of wearing masks that some people have. So I'm so eager for masks to become optional. I know we're a ways off, and that would be way too early to do that now, but it will come. Not soon enough, in my opinion. And then just anything you can do to accommodate people who do have that heightened sense of caution in terms of distancing, or even offering performances in an enhanced health safety format. We talked about the digital marketplace, and really, I just want to end with this idea that, what matters most now, and perhaps what COVID obscured for a period of time, was the underlying shifts happening in our culture and public tastes in art, the kinds of entertainment experiences that people, particularly young people, are experiencing, are changing. The commercial sector is responding to shifts in demand. The immersive experiences being offered, just the Van Gogh exhibitions around the world and in the US, are just the tip of the iceberg of what's coming down the pike in terms of commercially produced immersive experiences. Look at new facilities, new immersive museums opening, Super Blue in Miami, Area 15 in Las Vegas. Look at the website msgsphere.com, msgsphere.com. Madison Square Garden Entertainment is building 2 spherical buildings in Las Vegas and London, which will be the next generation immersive live entertainment venues. Look what ABBA is doing in London with cutting edge technology where the performers are avatars. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new day. The demand for sensory stimulation is only going to continue to grow. And what I'm worried about is the commercial producers are going to roll over the nonprofit art sector and just run away with demand. So product development is foremost in my mind right now, and our sectors need to get into R&D mode collaboratively come out of our corners, do R&D with artists leading that in a whole new way. That's going to attract the next generation of audiences, and that's where I think we need to focus now. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to spend a little time with you, and I look forward to your questions and comments as we do this. So I'm going to pop out of the screen share, Brad, and just come back into dialogue.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. I'm seeing so many comments in the chat about just being grateful for all of this data and the depth of it. And I want to thank, Alan, you and everyone on your team and all the folks in the cohort who've made it possible by actually reaching out to their audiences and gathering this data over 18 months. So there's a couple of questions that maybe you could address, Alan, in the Q&A. And then what I'd like to do, I've asked 4 folks who to be in an impromptu panel, and they are intrepidly saying yes to me, which I appreciate. And I'll ask them some questions, and we'll get into a bit of a discussion. But first, 2 questions here. One is about the digital offerings, and they're wondering what might be known about the motivations and demographics for digital participation versus live shows.
Wow, that's complicated. Thank you for a great question. I think preferences are still formed. It's like when COVID hit and everyone ran towards digital program, it was like the Wild West. It's like the gold rush. There's a California metaphor. Everyone was throwing so much spaghetti against the wall, just doing things, which was great. And everyone was doing it independently, and consumers were, I don't know how many consumers had really discovered Medici TV before COVID and all these aggregators. So consumers were discovering and really forming preferences where there were none. And I think that's just started. I think some people really learn to value programming. What I hear in focus groups is convenience. I don't have to drive. I can stay home. I don't need a babysitter. I can, watch with my dog in my lap. I can invite people over. So convenience, but also flexibility, the ability to watch when you want, the whole on-demand proposition, which is television, Netflix, to something like, has trained people to expect to get what they want when they want it. And that's, I think, slowly breaking down the commitment that is required to attend a live program. So it's a combination of value, but our, public interest in live programming, I'm not worried. Really, I think people understand because of the social value of being together. And this is what I think the big mistake with digital programming is thinking that means watching at home. Oh no, I think arts organizations can show digital programs in their venues, host them, do education work around it, and have hugely successful experiences because people want to come out and be in a room with other people.
Great, thanks. And then there was a question about ventilation. Has there been any discussion of ventilation affecting perceptions of the audience around safety?
Oh my God, do you remember last year when ventilation was a news story, and there was some diagram in a New York Times story that showed virus particles wafting over an audience. And I just thought, oh my God. I'm really not qualified to answer that question. I think ventilation was one of the things people were interested in learning about. Mm-hmm. But I also kind of feel like if you have to worry about ventilation, you're really, we're really not in a good place.
Okay, well, if there are other questions that come up, just put them into the Q&A or perhaps into the chat. But right now, I'd love to call on for folks to share some of their own experiences and their own reflections on this data. So I've asked Peter Chenot from TheaterWorks, who's been part of this, they've been part of this cohort and part of this surveying all the way through. Marnie Cook from the San Francisco Symphony, the Symphony as well, has been surveying with us all of this time. Jennifer Bielstein from ACT, and Adam Maggio from SF Batco, which I don't believe has been part of the cohort, but I know has had live performances, and I'd love for them to be part of this as well. So if we can get you all to turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves. Yay. There they are, these beautiful people. Thank you for saying yes in the moment. So I just want to, maybe ask some of you what you make of the data and maybe how that is, comporting with your experiences in real time, since I think all of you have had real in-person performances of some kind already.
I'll jump in.
Yeah,
So a slightly different answer to your question, but I will say that this data has been so important. We've been part of the cohort, and it's been so important to our decision making. So thank you, Alan, for taking the initiative to reach out and make sure it happened. It's been invaluable. So for us, it actually, because the data was showing that so few people would be ready to return in this fall, we thought, oh, for us, the earliest, and I'm sorry, Jennifer Bielstein, she, her pronouns, I'm the executive director at American Conservatory Theater, and we do a Christmas Carol each year, usually. And so seeing that the attendance would be so low, it was actually too big of a financial risk for us to commit to doing it this year, because we need to sell at about 80% of the house to just cover our baseline cost for it. So it caused us to say, let's wait till January, when it looks like confidence is a little bit higher. And that's when we're going back in a bigger way in January.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Marnie, you definitely have had performances, I think, starting in July and maybe even earlier than that. So maybe talk about that experience.
Sure. Hello, everybody. A pleasure to be here. And also, I just want to thank Alan and Brad and your entire teams for all of your work, because this information has been invaluable. And just hearing from our patrons, but also being able to see the collective responses as well. The collective results has, as Jennifer shared, really been helpful for us to be able to look real time at what we're doing and how we can project out. And we at the Symphony here in San Francisco have had the chance to actually open our doors in May of this year. And we've gone the gamut, really walking alongside the city's allowances and the state's allowances. So we actually open doors with, the vaccinated and unvaccinated section, with just a couple of hundred in the house. Davies Symphony Hall is 2,700, full with complete capacity and with masking at that time, which then led into, after I think the governor allowed us with not to have the separated sections indoors, to actually start really keeping everyone together as we moved into the summer months. And we're now a fully vaccinated required house, both for attendees and for performers, and everyone is required to wear masks. Those under 12 are required to provide a negative test. And thank you, Alex, for providing the data. We are now on average about 57% capacity. So we're seeing on average about 1,500 to 1,600 people in the hall. As we moved into the fall, obviously in the spring and summer months, we were ramping up to that. We have had a few halls that have been over 2,000 patrons, and it has just been joyous to see everybody's reaction to experiencing live performance again. I mean, I think the first few months and even into this fall, as those that are hearing live music and seeing live performance again, they're just applauding for people walking out on stage. They're just happy to be in the theater again. And so we're hopeful, that our percentage will grow as we move into the holidays and we look to 2022. Our hope is that our percentage will increase, but thankful for this cohort and all of the work so far.
Great. Adam, I'm going to call on you next because it was actually an SF Batco performance, which was my first return to live performance back in the spring, as I remember. And maybe tell us a little bit about that early experience and what you all learned from. You were one of the first to open doors.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks again, Alan, for that presentation. Thanks, Brad. Yes, the data definitely reflected our experience with our June 11th kind of one night only evening of songs, and then our mid-October theater festival, and we didn't have any programming in between because June 11th was that sweet spot post-vaccines, pre-Delta, and June 15th was the date that the city was changing their mandates, and so it was also before bars and restaurants were requiring proof of vaccine. So we required proof of vaccination, but people weren't used to those protocols yet. And people were so comfortable that we also required masks indoors. And people were wanting to take off their masks. And because everyone was so confident, you know, we were in that sweet spot. And you know, a lot of people forgot their vaccine cards because they weren't used to that yet. So we had to turn people away. It was, the logistics around it were very stressful, and everything was so new in that regard. But people were thrilled to be back. And then in October, you know, it was easier on our end because everyone's used to, you know, showing their vaccine cards and nobody wanted to take their mask off. I will say, one thing that I found really interesting in October was we had a lot of no-shows. We had about 20% of pre-sales not show up, which, you know, our ticket prices are cheap, so it's not a huge investment and for people to come. So it kind of felt like loyalty purchases, and then maybe not feeling as safe the day of. It was also that weekend in October that was incredibly beautiful, the 16th and 17th. So that may have had something to do with it too. But I thought that was interesting, the amount of no-shows and a lot of walk-ups, but we did not limit our capacity. And in the smaller space, we were operating in 2 spaces at the Brava. In the 60-seat studio, I was worried that people were going to, even though we made it very clear that we weren't limiting capacity, that people were going to be uncomfortable in that 60-seat studio at full capacity. And we only had one person out of a few sold out performances in there say, you know, come in, see this setup, and then leave. So that was very, very encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Great. Peter, I know you've had performances happening as well, and you've been part of this cohort all along. I'm wondering, you know, what you're experiencing with as people are coming in, but also what are you doing to kind of communicate with them about what you're doing in terms of safety? How are they responding to you? Maybe talk a bit about that real experience that you've been having.
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Alan, for this entire wonderful survey process. We've been using the data throughout, for sure. So at TheaterWorks Silicon Valley, I'm the director of marketing at TheaterWorks Silicon Valley. I use he, him pronouns. We started up our season again, the one we've been trying to get going now for many years. Started up in October. Our season 51 started up in October with Lizard Boy. It's a new musical. And we got, you know, audiences coming back in, you know, knowing from this data, knowing what's going on. We have all of our normal barriers, but we knew that the main barrier was health and safety, making sure that people were going to feel confident returning back to our theater space. So we did a lot of communication about what we were doing. We ended up being very strict, as most people are, with our health and safety protocols. We needed to do proof of vaccination with photo ID, make sure you have a mask on throughout the entire process, no concessions. We did also offer social distancing in our balcony for people who wanted to do that. We kept that wide open for people to move up there if they wanted to. Interestingly enough, we found that people liked having that idea of being able to go up there, but very few actually did. People were still seated in their subscription seats where they wanted to be, the seats that they purchased down in the orchestra. And for the most part, you know, we definitely had smaller audiences. We're all working in a little bit of a diminished capacity, but for the most part, people were very appreciative. In our post-show surveys, we asked them about health and safety at the performance, you know, from 0 to 5 stars, we got 80% 5 stars, 18% 4 stars. You know, so it's right up there. People are glad to be back. Lots of smiles behind the mask, lots of tears when people get on stage. It was a great moment for our new artistic director to introduce himself to the audience, and there's just lots of cheers and excitement going on in the venue.
Great, thank you. There's some questions in the chat, which I'm going to try to find, but in the meantime, I've got a question for Marnie, because I did go to the symphony last Saturday night, and I had gone in July, and you all did not have concessions. It was a 90-minute program. We were in and out. It was sort of like in, out, don't talk to anybody, just, you know. And this, I looked up and I was coming in and oh, there's people standing there with glasses of champagne. I can see them in the window. Clearly there's concessions. There was an intermission. How, you know, what prompted that decision, and have you noticed a difference in the way maybe that the audiences have been responding to that decision? Because obviously you're taking your mask off indoors if you're going to have that glass of champagne.
Sure, thanks, Brad. Yes, it's so interesting, our journey, right? That we've all been on through this. And so this, as we went into the fall, with the allowances that the city was giving us, with being able to, as we're considered one of the larger gatherings of 1,000 or more people, we are allowed as a fully vaccinated house to have concessions. And so as Peter was sharing, you know, this is something that we communicated out to patrons, also giving them the chance to pre-order as well in any of those reminder emails going out. And we haven't heard too much pushback. I will ask my colleagues on this webinar call to please put in the chat if there are any specific examples of any type of concern that's been expressed to us, but I haven't heard that much. We have definitely, it's kind of retraining ourselves, you know, as we've all learned to stand in line. You know, it's the interest in concessions has really slowly grown. There, you know, when we first started it, not that many people wanted to participate, but now more and more they're getting comfortable with it, and our concessionaire is actually seeing the results of it. So I think just with time that will grow. And thank you, Alex, for putting that in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure, and I know that we're already a little past the hour, and we can hang on if folks have time, but as people may need to be peeling off, I just want to make sure, Jennifer, if you can talk a bit about our Bay Area Arts Together, the Ready campaign, and maybe you invite folks to join if they don't know about it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So early this summer, many of us were having conversations influenced by this data and just our experience and anticipation of what would be next about how more conservative the Bay Area has been in response to COVID. You know, all good, careful, very safe. And what could we do to rebuild confidence in returning to the arts? So Theater Bay Area managers were having this conversation, Arts Alliance managers, leaders were having this conversation, East Bay Arts Alliance were having it. So just we pulled together and we said, okay, let's develop some shared messaging to help remind people of the value we bring to their lives to help heal and connect and inspire and unify and everything. And we developed that. So the creative director from the symphony, actually Larry Williams, and Jamie Catalano from Shotgun Players in the East Bay came up with the concept, and it's ready. The word is ready, and we add things to it: ready to inspire, ready to heal, ready to celebrate, ready to bring joy. And we are calling it Bay Area Arts Together. There's a website, bayareaartstogether.org, and using that hashtag throughout, and it has about 150 organizations across the Bay, every area of geography of the Bay Area, as well as all artistic disciplines, cultural organizations. So anyone is welcome to be a part of it. We hope it can just build. And if we have this shared messaging out there, that it will encourage people to change these patterns that they have developed over the past, almost 2 years, and give it a try, and then continue to grow, as there have been some examples of growing levels of confidence as we're at this moment in time. So
yeah, thank you for that. Alan, there are a couple questions in here about the digital participation and what indicators there might have been to make us feel like that's something that will continue now that live performance has begun.
Well, I will take this opportunity to encourage those who are funders who are on this webinar to consider investing in research and experimentation with digital. It is the big vista in front of us right now, and we need to come to grips with it as a sector, not as a huge multinational corporation with 10,000 branch offices and no headquarters. You know, like we need to come together around digital. So, you know, we got so far as asking people what kind, you know, first of all, parsing out interest in live streams versus pre-recorded videos. And that was fascinating. I mean, like 30% of people actually preferred live streams, like the raw, unedited, the real deal. And that surprised, I think, particularly some orchestras who were quite focused on spending millions of dollars producing completely polished recordings. And to hear that people actually just want the raw live experience was very challenging for some. But we also asked about different, you know, like, would you like to learn about the lives of playwrights and composers, and would you like to see master classes, and all the different kinds of content. So we delved into that, but it's difficult to research because people haven't seen a lot of that. They're just imagining it. It's hypothetical. So we need to get to the place soon where we're actually testing real digital work and actually gauging people's interest levels. So, you know, I would love to get to the point where, say, in the orchestra field, you know, every year orchestras collaborated on digital programs to introduce audiences to, you know, 10 soloists they've never heard of, or, you know, there's just so much opportunity for audience development. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I'm going to give one more opportunity for anybody to throw a question into the chat. I'm going to patter a little bit. There's been a couple of questions about whether this is being recorded. It is being recorded, and we will make it available on the Theater Bay Area website. Folks have already also asked if we can share the deck that Alan has shown us, and Alan's generous response is yes. So we will make that available on the site as well. And Michael Rice, I'm going to ask you, is it possible for us to actually just email everybody who showed up today with the links to those two things once they're up and ready to go, so that people don't have to just check randomly?
Yes, we can do that.
Great. So we'll just send them to you, and then you'll have it. But you can also point, you know, to our site to other folks on your team who might want to take a look. All right. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to wrap it up, I think, and just say again how grateful I am to everyone in the cohort who has done this work with us, to Alan and his team, to Alan Klein, who used to be at Theater Bay Area as a staff member. We're great to be working with him again in this new way, to my panelists who intrepidly jumped in to just do this in an impromptu way. And I'm thrilled to see us reopening. We're on our way. I kind of felt it like we would never get here, but we're here, and it's exciting to go back to live performance. Thank you all this morning.